Before I continue, I want to get to know you too. Write the flag colors of the country you're watching from, and I'll try to guess. Who knows? Maybe we're neighbors. My name is Beatrice. I'm 67 years old, and throughout my entire life, I've built my own path. I wasn't born into wealth. At 14, I was already working as a cleaner in downtown Atlanta office buildings. At 20, I studied accounting at night while mopping floors during the day. By 30, I owned my own financial consulting firm. By 50, I was running one of the largest real estate investment companies in Georgia. I did it all alone. My husband Marcus died when Darnell was only 8 years old. A massive heart attack took him in minutes, leaving me with a young son, enormous mortgage payments, and no life insurance. I could have given up, could have sold everything and moved back to my mama's house in rural Georgia, accepting defeat, but that wasn't my nature. I worked 16-hour days for years, missed school meetings, birthday parties, theater performances, everything so that Darnell could have what I never had: first-class education, decent clothes, the chance to be somebody without starting from zero like I did. And he grew up well, got his law degree, passed the bar, started practicing at a prestigious firm. He met Larayah at one of those fancy corporate events, full of beautiful people, empty inside. She was a public relations specialist for a cosmetics company, always immaculate, always wearing that smile that never reached her eyes. From the beginning, I sensed something was wrong. It wasn't overprotective maternal intuition, it was observation. The way she looked at my modest home in Cascade Heights, at my functional furniture without designer labels, at my practical clothes, the way she'd turn her face when I told stories about the past, about cleaning offices or studying while hungry because I couldn't afford dinner. "What a difficult phase, Beatrice," she'd say in that condescending tone. "Thank goodness all that's behind you now." As if my past were some disease I'd recovered from, something shameful that needed to be forgotten. But Darnell was in love, or at least that's what he claimed. I could see the sparkle in his eyes when he looked at her, how hard he tried to impress her, to be the man she wanted him to be, a man increasingly distant from the son I had raised. The wedding was extravagant: 200 guests, 5-star catering, a dress imported from Europe. Larayah insisted on planning every detail, and every detail screamed ostentation. When I suggested it might be too much, that a more intimate wedding would be more meaningful, she laughed in that way that wasn't quite a laugh. "Beatrice, I know you come from a simpler background," touching my arm with studied condescension, "but Darnell deserves a celebration worthy of his position in society. You want people to think he can't afford it?" I paid for half the wedding, not because I agreed, but because he was my son, and I still believed that a mother's love could smooth over any rough edges. When Peyton was born 3 years later, I felt like maybe things would change. A grandchild has the power to reconnect generations, to remind people what really matters. But Larayah had other plans. She started subtly. "Beatrice, the pediatrician recommended we limit visits. The baby needs to build immunity." Then, "Beatrice, could you not kiss Peyton? Germs, you know how it is." And finally, "Beatrice, you should call before coming over. We don't want Peyton getting used to unscheduled visits." Unscheduled visits to my own son's house to see my own grandson. But I swallowed it all, because that's what mothers did, right? They swallowed, smiled, adapted, anything to keep the peace, to not be labeled an interfering mother-in-law, to not give credence to Larayah's complaints. 6 months ago, they started looking for a bigger place. Larayah was 6 months pregnant with their second child, and the 3-bedroom apartment where they lived was no longer sufficient for her ambitions. She wanted a penthouse, wanted a terrace, outdoor kitchen, private pool, wanted to show off on social media, host her girlfriends for Instagram-worthy brunches with panoramic views of Atlanta. The problem was simple. They didn't have the money. Darnell's salary was good, but not enough for a luxury penthouse. Larayah hadn't worked since Peyton was born, claiming she wanted to dedicate herself entirely to motherhood, which in practice meant dedicating herself entirely to expensive lunches and spa sessions while the nanny cared for the child. That's when Darnell came to visit me alone, without Larayah, which was already rare. He sat in my simple kitchen, stirring the coffee I'd made, avoiding my eyes. "Mom," he began, I already knew what was coming. "You know we're looking for a bigger place." "I know. We found the perfect penthouse. 4 master suites, terrace with outdoor kitchen, 2 parking spots. It's everything Larayah's always dreamed of." I waited. He continued. "The problem is the down payment. We need $3 million. With my salary, I can finance the rest, but the down payment..." He finally looked at me. "Could you help us? It would be a loan. I'd pay you back." It wouldn't be a loan. We both knew that. But he needed to maintain the illusion, the masculine dignity that he wasn't simply asking his mother for money. $3 million. It was a lot of money, but I had it. Decades of hard work, smart investments, and frugal living had given me a comfortable reserve. I could give that money and barely feel it in my day-to-day life. I looked at my son, saw the dark circles under his eyes, the weight on his shoulders, the way he avoided my gaze. I saw the boy I'd raised alone, who woke up in the middle of the night crying for his dead father, whom I held while promising everything would be okay. I said, "All right, but I don't want it to be a loan. I want to give it as a gift, to you, to Larayah, to my grandchildren." His eyes filled with tears. He stood up and hugged me tight like he hadn't done in years. "Thank you, Mom. I don't know how to thank you. Larayah will be so happy." Larayah was happy. I saw it through social media. Photos of the penthouse, effusive captions about dreams realized and hard work paying off. No mention of me, of course. No public acknowledgement. But I didn't expect any. I hadn't done it for recognition. I'd done it for my son. The move happened 3 months ago. I was invited to see the apartment exactly once. Larayah gave me a quick tour, pointing out every expensive detail, every luxury finish, every designer piece of furniture. When I commented that maybe a $50,000 Persian rug was excessive for a house with a small child, she smiled that smile. "You're just not used to this standard, Beatrice, but don't worry, we have professionals who handle the maintenance." After that day, visits became increasingly sporadic. There was always an excuse. Peyton was sick, they had commitments, the housekeeper was off, and the house was a mess. Larayah was tired, until I stopped being invited at all. And now, at 2 in the morning, looking at that message on my phone, I finally understood the truth. I wasn't family. I was a financier, a resource to be kept at arm's length, called upon only when necessary, discarded once I'd served my function. She thinks you talk too much and bother her guests. I talk too much. I'm a bother. Me, who gave $3 million so that woman could have her dream penthouse. Me who raised my son alone, who worked myself to the bone to give him everything. I was the problem. I got out of bed. I wouldn't sleep again that night. I went to my office,
turned on the computer, and opened the folder where I kept all the documents from the penthouse transaction. Because I wasn't naive. I wasn't the foolish old woman Larayah thought I was. When I decided to give that money, I protected myself.
I hired the best real estate attorney I knew, an old friend from the days when I was still building my empire. Beatrice, he had told me, are you sure about this? That's a lot of money to give without guarantees. I'm sure, I replied, but I want it done the right way. I want legal protection. And that's how the penthouse was purchased, not in Darnell and Larayah's names, but in the name of a holding company of which I was the sole owner. Darnell and Larayah had a real estate contract allowing them to live there rent-free, with one specific clause. The contract could be unilaterally revoked by the owner in case of disrespect to the established family terms. Family terms, a phrase vague enough to be interpreted broadly, a phrase my attorney had inserted specifically for this type of situation. I opened the contract, read the clause again, then picked up the phone and called Roosevelt, my lawyer, completely ignoring the fact that it was 2:30 in the morning. Roosevelt. His voice was hoarse with sleep. Is everything okay? Did something happen? Roosevelt, I said, my voice firm as steel. I need you to prepare the documents. I'm invoking the contract termination clause. There was a pause. The penthouse? Darnell's penthouse? Yes, I want the documents ready by tomorrow at noon, and I want the sheriff to deliver the eviction notice tomorrow afternoon during the birthday party. Another silence. Beatrice, this is going to be war. I know. Prepare the documents, Roosevelt. I hung up and looked out the window. The city slept below, lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere in that penthouse I had paid for, my son and his wife slept peacefully, having no idea of the hurricane about to descend upon their lives. They wanted to keep me at a distance. They were about to discover just how close I really was, because the penthouse wasn't theirs, never had been. It was mine, and I was about to take it back. I didn't sleep. I sat in the office, calculating, planning, preparing every move like it was a chess game. And maybe that's exactly what it was. A game where I'd been naive enough to hand over my most valuable pieces, believing that family love meant something. At 6 in the morning, I made my coffee and began reviewing all documents related to the penthouse, every contract, every receipt, every transfer confirmation. $3 million that came directly from my account to the construction company. Not 1 cent passed through Darnell or Larayah, or their hands. Everything done through the holding company, everything absolutely legal and documented. Roosevelt called me at 8. The documents are ready, but Beatrice, you need to understand the consequences. Once the sheriff delivers this notification, there's no going back. Darnell and Larayah will have 30 days to vacate the property. 30 days is too long, I replied. Isn't there a way to speed it up? Technically, in cases of real estate contracts with family agreement breach clauses, we can request immediate vacation if there's proof of serious disrespect to the terms. Do you have that proof? I thought about Darnell's message on my phone. She thinks you talk too much and bother her guests. I thought about all the denied invitations, all the canceled visits, all the times I felt like a stranger in my own son's life. I have it, I said. Messages, emails, a record of everything. I'll forward it to you now. I spent the entire morning compiling evidence. Every message from Darnell canceling visits, every post by Larayah on social media flaunting the penthouse as if it were her achievement, without a single mention of me. Every photo of parties, lunches, gatherings in that penthouse where I was never invited. The 2 a.m. message was the cherry on top, the final, irrefutable proof that they didn't see me as family, but as a walking bank to be accessed when convenient and discarded when inconvenient.
At noon, Roosevelt called me again. "It's done. The sheriff will go there at 3 p.m. I got the schedule from Larayah's social media. The party starts at 2, right?" "Correct." Roosevelt, his voice was serious. "Are you absolutely certain about this? Because once this starts, there's no undoing your relationship with Darnell." "My relationship with Darnell is already destroyed. I was just the last one to realize it. Now I'm just going to formalize what's already reality." I hung up and looked at the clock. 12:15 p.m. In less than 3 hours, my grandson's party would be happening, a party I wasn't welcome at in the house I had paid for. I dressed carefully. I wasn't going to the party, but I had other plans for that afternoon. I chose a navy blue suit, elegant but discreet. I pinned my hair back, applied neutral lipstick. I observed my reflection in the mirror and saw a 67-year-old woman who had worked her entire life. Wrinkles around the eyes, expression lines on the forehead, hands that were no longer soft despite expensive creams. A woman who had built an empire from nothing, who had raised a son alone, who had believed that unconditional love would be repaid with respect. A woman who was about to teach a very expensive lesson about consequences. I grabbed my purse and car keys. There was something I needed to do before the sheriff arrived. One last visit. I drove to the neighborhood where the penthouse was located. It was one of the best in Atlanta. Luxury glass towers surrounded by impeccable landscaping, the kind of place where businessmen, politicians, and celebrities lived, the kind of place Larayah had always wanted to be. I parked across the street where I had a perfect view of the building entrance. It was 2:15 p.m. I watched the guests arriving. Women in expensive outfits, men in tailored suits, children impeccably dressed like little adults. Imported cars took turns at the entrance, handed over to valets with that steadied casualness of those accustomed to luxury. I saw a woman get out of a Mercedes carrying a huge gift wrapped in metallic paper. I recognized her face from Larayah's social media. One of her friends, a digital influencer who posted photos of international trips and dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. More guests, more luxury, more ostentation, and not a single person I recognized. No childhood friends of Darnell's, no college classmates, no relatives from my family, just Larayah's social circle, people who measured their worth by clothing labels and car models. At 2:40 p.m., I saw the sheriff arrive, a middle-aged man in a dark suit carrying a leather briefcase. He checked the address, consulted some papers, and entered the building. My heart accelerated, not from fear or regret, but from anticipation, from an almost primitive satisfaction of seeing justice finally being served. I imagined the scene upstairs, the penthouse full of beautiful people, ambient music, waiters circulating with trays of canapés and champagne. Peyton, my 2-year-old grandson, probably dressed like a little prince, being displayed like a trophy while Larayah took photos for her social media. And then the doorbell ringing. The sheriff at the door. The initial confusion. Who is it? Why are you here? Then the envelope being delivered. Darnell tearing open the seal, reading, rereading, the blood draining from his face as understanding set in. Eviction notice. Contract termination for family agreement breach. Immediate vacation required. Sitting in my car, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who finally stops being a doormat, who finally stands up and says, enough. My phone rang. Darnell. I ignored it. It rang again, and again, and again. I let it ring. Then the messages started. Mom, what is this? There's a sheriff here saying we have to leave the penthouse. This has to be a mistake. Mom, for God's sake, answer the phone. All the guests are seeing this. It's humiliating. Larayah is having a nervous breakdown. How can you do this on your grandson's birthday? I read each message calmly. Then I typed a single response.
You told me not to come to the party because I bothered Larayah's guests, so I didn't go. But I sent a representative in my place, the sheriff. I sent it and turned off the phone. I didn't want more conversations, didn't want explanations or pleas or empty promises that things would change. I was tired of being the understanding mother, the mother-in-law who swallows insults, the grandmother kept at a distance. I started the car and left. I had one last place to go before this day ended. I drove downtown to the building where my old office was. I had retired 5 years ago, passing company management to my partners, but I still maintained a small office there, a space on the top floor with a city view, where I sometimes went when I needed to think. The receptionist greeted me with surprise. "Miss Beatrice, what a surprise to see you here. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Claudia. I'm going up to my office. I don't want to be disturbed." The elevator rose slowly through the 15 floors. I watched my reflection in the mirrored doors. I was still calm, still certain of my decision, but there was a sharp pain in my chest, a dull ache I recognized as loss. Because no matter how despicable Larayah was, no matter how much Darnell had disappointed me, he was still my son. The boy I had rocked through countless nights when he had colic, the teenager who cried on my shoulder when he got his first heartbreak, the young man who gave a speech at my 60th birthday, thanking me for everything I had done. Where had that boy gone? When had he transformed into the man who thought it acceptable to exclude me from my own grandson's life because his wife found me bothersome? I entered the office and locked the door. I sat in the leather chair facing the panoramic window. Below, the city bustled, people coming and going, each carrying their own dramas, their own pain, their own betrayals. I turned my phone back on. 53 missed calls, 37 messages, all from Darnell. None from Larayah, of course. She never even had my number saved. I started reading the messages in order. "Mom, this has to be a misunderstanding. The sheriff said you rescinded the real estate contract, said the penthouse is yours, and we have 30 days to leave. How can it be yours? It was a gift." I stopped at that message. It was a gift? No, Darnell. It was a loan of love that you never intended to repay. I continued reading the messages. All the guests left. Larayah is lying down with a compress on her head. Peyton is confused. He doesn't understand why the party ended. I felt a pang of guilt about Peyton. He was innocent in all this. But then the anger returned. Because if Darnell and Larayah really cared about Peyton, they would have included his grandmother in his life. They would have taught him about family, about respect, about gratitude. Instead, they were raising another little Larayah, another child who would measure people by the money they had and the benefits they could provide. The last message was different from the others. "I need to talk to you in person. Please, let me come there." I hesitated. Then I typed the office address and room number. "Come alone. If Larayah comes with you, I won't open the door." The response came immediately. "I'm leaving now." I got up and went to the small bathroom in the office. I washed my face, touched up my makeup. I needed to be in control when Darnell arrived. Couldn't show weakness. Couldn't let maternal love make me back down because that's exactly what he expected.
He expected me to give in like I always had, expected tears, hugs, mutual apologies, and everything going back to the way it was before. But it wouldn't go back. It couldn't go back, because the way it was before was me being treated like a second-class citizen in my own son's life. 20 minutes later, there were 3 hesitant knocks on the door. "Mom, it's me." I opened the door. Darnell was unrecognizable. Disheveled hair, wrinkled shirt, red eyes. He had been crying. My son had been crying. I felt my heart tighten, but I didn't back down. "Come in." He entered and stood in the middle of the room, as if he didn't know what to do with his hands. Finally, he collapsed in the chair across from my desk. "Mom, what was that? What happened?" I sat in my chair and looked at him directly. "You really don't know?" "I mean, I know I sent you that message yesterday, but I never imagined you'd react this way, that you'd evict us from our home." "Your home?" I repeated slowly. "Darnell, that was never your home. It's my penthouse that I allowed you to live rent-free. There's a very big difference between the two." "But you said it was a gift. You said the money was a gift." "The property was always mine, and frankly, you should have read the contracts you signed." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration he'd made since childhood. "But why? Why do this?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. "Because I reached my limit, Darnell. Because there's a limit to how much a person can be disrespected, humiliated, and discarded before saying enough."
Disrespected? We never disrespected you. No? I picked up my phone and opened the message he had sent. I read it aloud. "She thinks you talk too much and bother her guests. It's better if you don't show up to Peyton's birthday." I looked at him. "That's not disrespect?" He looked away. "I didn't mean it that way. Larayah was nervous about the party, and she ordered you to exclude me," I completed, "and you obeyed like a well-trained puppy." "It wasn't like that." He stood up, agitated. "You don't understand. Larayah she's complicated, has her quirks. If you would just try to adapt a little." "Adapt?" I stood up too, feeling the anger rise. I gave $3 million so that woman could have her dream penthouse. I adapted when she started limiting my visits to my grandson. I adapted when I was excluded from all family gatherings. I adapted until there was nothing left of me but an open wallet. "Mom, it's not like that." "It's exactly like that. And you know what's the saddest part? You don't even realize it. You're so blind, so manipulated by that woman that you don't even see what she did to you, don't even see what you became." Your support truly keeps me going, and if you'd like to be a source of inspiration for others too, give this story a like and subscribe. Together, we can reach and help even more people. And back to the story. Darnell fell silent, looking at the floor. "I raised you alone," I continued, my voice breaking a little. "I worked 16 hours a day so you could have everything: education, comfort, opportunities. I refused marriage proposals because I was afraid a stepfather might treat you badly. I sacrificed my personal life, my youth, my dreams, all for you. I know that." "No, you don't know, because if you knew, you never would have sent me that message. You never would have thought it acceptable for your wife to forbid me from going to my own grandson's birthday party. You never would have stayed silent while I was systematically erased from your life." He raised his eyes, and there were tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I'm sorry. I really am sorry.
but you can't take the penthouse away from us. Peyton is starting at the new neighborhood school. Larayah is 7 months pregnant. We have nowhere to go. You have 30 days to find something. 30 days? Do you know how much a decent apartment costs in this city? With my salary, I'll have to cut back on everything. Peyton will have to leave private school. We'll have to sell the car. I looked at him, this 34-year-old man who still expected his mother to solve all his problems. Welcome to real life, Darnell. The life I lived for years while raising you, while building everything I had alone. You'll discover that it's perfectly possible to live without luxuries. I did it and survived.
Darnell wiped the tears from his face with the back of his hand, a gesture that painfully reminded me of the boy he used to be. Is this revenge? Is that it? You're punishing me because I sent that message? It's not revenge, Darnell. It's consequences. It's the difference between giving something and having that thing used against you. It's about dignity, something you apparently forgot I also have. He sank back into the chair, his head in his hands. Larayah is going to kill me. She invited all her friends. Everyone saw the sheriff. Everyone saw the documents. She's destroyed. The humiliation. I felt the anger return with full force. And my humiliation when I was excluded from my grandson's birthday party, when I was treated like an intruder in the house I paid for. Where was your concern about humiliation then? He didn't answer. We sat there in silence for long minutes, only the sound of the air conditioning filling the space between us. What do you want me to do? He asked finally, his voice tired. What do I need to do for you to change your mind? I sat down again, folding my hands on the desk. Nothing. Because it's not about doing something now. It's about everything you didn't do before. It's about all the times you chose comfort over what was right. All the times you let Larayah disrespect me without saying a word. All the times you treated me like a financier instead of your mother. When was the last time you called me just to talk? Not to ask for money, not to solve some problem, just to talk, to see how I was doing. He opened his mouth, then closed it, because we both knew the answer. He couldn't remember. When was the last time you took me to lunch, included me in an outing with Peyton, posted a photo of me on your social media with a loving caption? You never cared about those things. I cared, yes. I always cared. But I pretended I didn't because I was afraid. Afraid of being the clingy mother, the annoying mother-in-law, the inconvenient grandmother. So I swallowed it, smiled, and settled for the crumbs of attention you threw my way. I stood up again, walking to the window. The city below continued its frantic dance, oblivious to the drama unfolding on the 15th floor. But that message yesterday, that was the last straw. Because there, it was explicit. I wasn't welcome. I wasn't wanted. I was tolerated when convenient and discarded when not. And I realized I wasn't going to accept that anymore. Mom, we can talk. We can change. I promise that. No. I turned to face him. I don't want promises. I don't want empty conversations. Because we've had those conversations before, Darnell. After Larayah banned my visits, after you spent Christmas without inviting me, after every slight, you came with promises, and nothing ever changed. This time would be different. No, it wouldn't, because Larayah would continue being Larayah, and you would continue choosing the peace of your marriage over respect for your mother. And I would continue being pushed further and further out until I disappeared completely. He stood up desperately. What about Peyton? He's your grandson. Are you just going to abandon him? That question hurt. It hurt because Peyton was the only truly innocent part in this whole story. But I also knew I couldn't use a grandson as emotional hostage. I'm not abandoning Peyton. The doors of my house are open to him whenever you want to bring him. But I'm not going to beg for scraps of attention anymore.
I'm not going to pretend everything's fine when it's not. And I'm not going to finance a luxury lifestyle for people who treat me like garbage. We don't treat you like garbage. Tell me something, Darnell. I crossed my arms. If I didn't have money, if I were just a retired elderly lady living on Social Security, would Larayah be so interested in maintaining contact with me, or would I be completely discarded? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew the truth. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Now I need you to leave. I have things to do. Mom, please. Leave, Darnell. He walked to the door, then stopped without turning around. I love you, Mom. I know you don't believe it now, but I love you. I love you too, son. I always will. But love doesn't mean accepting disrespect, and it doesn't mean being a doormat. The door closed behind him. I was alone in the office, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. There was no victory there, no real satisfaction, just the bitter feeling of having done what was necessary, even though it was hard. I sat down again and picked up my phone. I had a message from Roosevelt. Beatrice, I heard from the sheriff that the notice was delivered. Were there any problems? Is your son trying to contact you? I replied, everything went according to plan. Maintain legal proceedings. There will be no backing down. The response came quickly. Understood. I'll monitor the situation. If you need anything, I'm at your disposal. I looked at the clock. 6 p.m. It had been only 16 hours since I received that message from Darnell. 16 hours that had changed everything.
I gathered my things and left the office. I needed to go home, take a hot shower, try to process everything that had happened. But when I got in the elevator, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Beatrice? A female voice I didn't recognize. This is Marina, Larayah's friend. Ah, one of the party friends. Yes? Look, I know we don't know each other, but I need to tell you something. What you did today was terrible. Humiliating your daughter-in-law in front of all the guests, ruining your grandson's party. What kind of person does that? I felt the anger rising again. The kind of person who got tired of being disrespected. Thank you for the call. Wait, you're not just going to hang up. I need to tell you that Larayah is... I hung up, blocked the number. I wasn't interested in hearing about Larayah's emotional state. Not after everything. When I got home, I found my building quiet and familiar. The doorman greeted me as always, having no idea what an earthquake my day had been. I went up to my apartment, this simple, cozy place that was truly mine. It didn't have a panoramic view, no outdoor kitchen on the balcony, no private pool, but it had something the $3 million penthouse never had. It was honestly mine, paid for with my work, decorated my way, filled with my memories. I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away some of the tension. Then I put on my old, comfortable pajamas and made tea. I sat on the sofa with the steaming cup, looking at the photos on the shelf. Darnell as a baby, Darnell as a child, Darnell as a teenager, Darnell at graduation day, Darnell at his wedding. And then the photos with Peyton, my grandson whom I barely knew because Larayah had built a wall between us. Had I done the right thing? Had I been too cruel? But then I remembered the message. I remembered all the times I was excluded, ignored, disrespected. I remembered that I had given $3 million and received no sincere thank you in return. No, I hadn't been cruel. I had been fair. Finally. Now, I'm going to rebuild my life without them. I'm going to stop begging for love from people who clearly don't want to give it to me. I'm going to use my money for things that really matter. Like what? I thought for a moment. It was a good question.
What to do with $3 million that would no longer be tied up in a penthouse? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. After hanging up, I kept thinking. The penthouse would be returned to my name in 30 days. I could sell it, invest the money, or... An idea began forming in my head. An idea that made me smile for the first time that terrible day. The next morning, I woke up early. Despite having slept little, my head was buzzing with plans, possibilities, a strange feeling of freedom I hadn't felt in years. It was as if by cutting the cord that tied me to that toxic relationship, I had recovered a part of myself that had been dormant. I made my coffee and sat at the table with a notebook. It was an old habit from my businesswoman days. Whenever I had an important decision, I put everything on paper. Facts, numbers, pros and cons. Emotion could start the process, but logic needed to guide it. I wrote at the top of the page, penthouse, next steps. Option 1, sell. I'd recovered the $3 million, maybe even more since the market was hot. I could invest it and live comfortably off the returns. Option 2, rent. Passive monthly income. But that would mean management, maintenance, possibly problematic tenants. Option 3, I stopped. Option 3 was what had kept me awake most of the night. It was bold, it was different, and it made my heart beat faster in a way that money in the bank never did. I picked up the phone and called Clarine. Good morning. Are you free this morning? Yes. Why? I need your help with the project. Can you come here? An hour later, Clarine was sitting in my living room looking at the papers I had spread on the coffee table. Let me see if I understand, she said slowly. You want to turn the penthouse into a space for women? Not any space. A refuge for women who are starting over. Single mothers, women leaving abusive relationships, elderly ladies who lost everything and need to get back on their feet. Clarine looked at me with admiration. Beatrice, this is ambitious. I know, but think with me. That place has 4 master suites. It could comfortably house up to 8 women. It has that huge common area. It has the industrial kitchen that Larayah insisted on installing. It has everything. And how would it work? I stood up, excited now that I was verbalizing the idea. It would be temporary, 6 months, maximum 1 year, the time for them to reorganize, find work, save money. I would offer not just housing, but also support, training classes, help with resumes, mentoring. You've thought about how much this would cost. Much less than $3 million sitting in a penthouse for ungrateful people. And I have other investments. I can fund this. Clarine smiled. You know what I think? I think it's the best revenge possible. Transform Larayah's symbol of ingratitude into something that really helps people. It's not revenge, I corrected. It's purpose. It's taking something that was being used for vanity and ostentation and transforming it into something meaningful.
We spent the rest of the morning planning. Clarine had experience in NGO management. She volunteered at a shelter for women victims of domestic violence. Her knowledge was invaluable. You'll need a legal structure, she explained. Create a foundation or association. You'll need bylaws, tax ID, all the bureaucracy. I have a lawyer who can handle that. And you'll need help. You can't do everything alone. Psychologists, social workers, people who understand these issues. I can hire them or seek volunteers. And you have to think about selection criteria. How will you choose who gets to live there? That was the hard part. How to decide who deserved another chance most. But then I thought about myself 30 years ago, young, widowed, with a small child and debts up to my neck. If someone had offered me a safe place to live while I got back on my feet,
my life would have been less hard. Let's prioritize single mothers, I decided. Women with small children who need stability to find work, and older women who lost everything. Women's society discards as if they had no more value. Clarine wrote everything down. Have you thought of a name? I thought about it. Then I smiled. House of Renewal. Simple as that. Perfect. When Clarine left, I called Roosevelt. I need you to prepare documentation to create a foundation, House of Renewal. The objective will be to offer temporary housing and support to women in vulnerable situations. There was a pause. And the penthouse will be the foundation's headquarters? I want to donate the property to the entity as soon as it's legalized. Beatrice, are you sure? It's a $3 million asset. Roosevelt, I spent my life accumulating money to leave to my son. I thought that would guarantee he'd love me, respect me. But money doesn't buy love. And idle money is just numbers in an account. I'd rather use it for something that makes a real difference. I understand. I'll start preparing the documents today. In the following days, I dove headfirst into the project. It was like building my company again. That same energy, that same sense of purpose. But this time, it wasn't about profit. It was about meaning. Darnell tried to contact me several times. Messages, calls, even a letter delivered by mail. I read the letter. It was long, full of pleas, apologies, and promises. It said Larayah was sorry, that he'd had a serious conversation with her, that things would be different. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond because words were easy. Real change was hard, and I was no longer willing to believe in empty promises. 2 weeks after the party incident, Roosevelt called me. Beatrice, I need to warn you, Darnell hired a lawyer. They're trying to contest the eviction. My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice steady. On what grounds? They claim there was a verbal donation of the property, that you promised to give the house to them. They're trying to prove donation with witnesses. I felt anger and disappointment in equal parts. My own son was suing me, was distorting the truth, inventing narratives, all to not lose the luxury he'd become accustomed to. Roosevelt, you know all the documents are in order. The property was always mine. The real estate contract is signed by them. They have no case. I know, and the judge will probably see that too, but it will take time. Lawsuits are slow. It could take months. Let them take months. I won't back down. There's one more thing. Larayah is giving interviews. Interviews? To blogs, gossip sites, saying you're a cruel mother-in-law who expelled a pregnant family from their home. She's playing the victim. I laughed. There was no humor in the laugh, but it was that or cry. Let her talk. The truth always comes out. But I admit it hurt. It hurt to see my name being dragged through the mud, to be painted as the villain when all I'd done was defend myself. It hurt to see people who didn't even know me giving opinions, judging, condemning. One night, I received a message from an unknown number. It was a link to a video. Against my better judgment, I clicked. It was Larayah, sitting on a white sofa. I didn't recognize the place, probably some friend's house, wearing a maternity blouse that accentuated her belly, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. I never imagined it would end like this. I always treated my mother-in-law with respect, always included her in family life. But she's jealous of my relationship with her son. And when I couldn't give her the attention she wanted anymore, she got revenge. Kicked us out of our home while and pregnant, with a small child. Every word was a lie. Every tear fake. And yet, in the comments, there were hundreds of people believing, cursing, calling me a monster. I closed the video and breathed deeply. I needed to remember why I was doing this, not for the approval of strangers, but for my own dignity. 3 weeks after the eviction, the House of Renewal Foundation was officially registered. I was the president, Clarine the vice president, and we had formed a small but competent board of women who believed in the cause. I visited the penthouse for the first time since everything happened. Darnell and Larayah were still there. The lawsuit had guaranteed they could stay until the hearing, but I didn't run into them. I went at a time I knew they'd be out. I walked through the empty rooms without emotion. No nostalgia, no regret. I saw only possibilities. There, the common room where women could gather, share experiences, build a support network. There, the kitchen where we'd teach professional cooking for those who wanted to work in the field. There, the bedrooms that would house mothers and children, offering security and a fresh start. I took photos, made measurements, planned renovations, because Larayah had decorated everything to impress, not to welcome. I needed to transform that cold, ostentatious space into a warm place. When I was leaving, I encountered the building's janitor, Miss Rosalie, a woman in her late 50s who had always treated me kindly. "Miss Beatrice," she whispered, looking around as if afraid of being heard. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, Miss Rosalie." She pulled me to a corner of the hallway. "I shouldn't tell you this, but you've been so good to me. You need to know the truth about what happened here." My heart raced. What truth?
Miss Rosalie looked around once more, making sure we were truly alone in the hallway. "You know I clean the corridors on this floor, right? And sometimes when doors are open, we end up hearing things without meaning to." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "About 4 months ago, I was cleaning early, around 7 a.m. The penthouse door was cracked open because they'd received a delivery, and I heard Larayah talking on the phone, loud, nervous. What was she saying? She said, 'I know, Mom, I know, but I'm doing what I can. The old lady is too clingy. I need to distance her before she discovers something. And then, how long do you think I can keep this charade up? Darnell is stupid, but his mother isn't.'" I felt a chill run down my spine. She said that? Charade? She did. And there's more. About 2 weeks later, I saw her receiving a man here. It wasn't Darnell, an older man, well-dressed. They went into the penthouse together, and Darnell wasn't there. I know because he had just left for work. Could have been anything. A realtor. A decorator. No, Miss Beatrice. From the way they looked at each other, the way he touched her waist, it wasn't professional. And when he left 2 hours later, I saw him give her an envelope. My mind was working rapidly, processing this information. "Why are you telling me this now, Miss Rosalie?" She lowered her eyes. "Because I saw what happened at the party. I saw that woman painting you as the villain to everyone, and it's not right. You've always been polite to me, always greeted me, always treated me like a person. She never even looked at me, and now she's saying you're the bad one? That's not right." I touched her arm, feeling genuine gratitude. "Thank you for telling me, Miss Rosalie. And don't worry, your name won't be mentioned in anything." When I left the building, my head was buzzing. Charade. Larayah had used that word. What exactly was a charade? The marriage? Her love for Darnell? The pregnancy? No, it couldn't be the pregnancy. I'd seen her belly myself, and nobody fakes a 7-month pregnancy convincingly. But the rest? I called Roosevelt as soon as I got to the car. I need a private investigator, someone discreet,
and efficient. Beatrice, what's happening? Just get me the investigator. Today, if possible. "3 hours later, I was sitting in a modest cafe with a man in his 50s. Graying hair, an ordinary face you'd forget 2 minutes after seeing it. Perfect for an investigator. "Your lawyer gave me the basic details," he said. "Marcus was his name. You want me to investigate your daughter-in-law. I want to know everything about her. Past, present, who she associates with, where she goes when she says she's somewhere else. Everything." "This could take time and money." "I have both. How much time do you need?" 2 weeks for a preliminary report, a month for something complete. Start today."
Marcus nodded and put away the notes he'd made. "Can I ask why you're doing this? Not that it matters for the work, but it helps with context." I thought about the question. Why was I doing this? Revenge? Curiosity? Or simply the need to know the complete truth? Because I have the feeling there's much more to this story than I know, and I need all the information before making my final decisions. I understand. I'll start today. While driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about Miss Rosalie's words. The old lady is too clingy. I need to distance her before she discovers something. Discover what? What secret was Larayah keeping that was worth the effort of keeping me away? The following days were a mix of meetings for the foundation and anxiety about the investigation. We talked to architects about necessary renovations in the penthouse. We interviewed psychologists and social workers to form a support team. We created selection criteria for future residents. The project was taking shape, gaining its own life, and I discovered I had a talent I didn't know I possessed, inspiring other people to believe in causes. We got donations from companies, qualified volunteers, even positive coverage in local media. Retired businesswoman transforms luxury penthouse into refuge for vulnerable women, read the headline of one newspaper. The article had my photo and an interview where I explained the project without mentioning Darnell or Larayah. I didn't need to. The narrative sold itself. A week after hiring Marcus, he called me. "Miss Beatrice, I need to meet with you urgently." "Did you find something?" "I found something, and it's significant. Can you come to my office?" 40 minutes later, I was sitting in Marcus's small office, looking at a thick folder on the table. I don't usually get surprised in my work, but this case is something else. He opened the folder and began showing documents, photos, reports. Let's start with the basics. Larayah Montero, 32 years old, degree in public relations. So far, nothing wrong. But when I started digging into her past, things got interesting. He showed me a photo of Larayah when she was younger, maybe in her early 20s. She was at a party surrounded by older men, all clearly wealthy. Before meeting your son, Larayah had a very clear pattern of relationships, always with older men, always with money, and always ending with her receiving generous gifts when the relationship ended. Was she a scammer? Not exactly. She was too smart for that. She never asked for money directly, but always ended up with apartments, cars, jewelry, gifts she later sold. He continued flipping through the documents. 3 years ago,
She was in a relationship with a 55-year-old businessman, married, Richard or Rick Taylor. He spent a fortune on her, but then his wife found out and threatened a divorce that would cost him half his empire. Rick broke up with Larayah overnight. And that's when she met Darnell? Exactly. 2 months later. And look how interesting. He showed me photos of Larayah and Darnell at their first meetings. She met him at a corporate event, right? Yes, an event for successful lawyers. She went specifically to that event. I have messages from her to a friend saying she needed to catch a new fish, preferably younger and more manipulated than the previous one. I felt nauseous. My son had been a target from the beginning. I'm sorry, but yes. And it gets worse. Look at this.
He showed me bank statements. In the last 2 years, Larayah has been receiving regular transfers from an overseas account, always amounts between $5,000 and $10,000. In total, more than $200,000. From whom? From Richard Rick Taylor, the married ex-lover. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. They continued the relationship? They did. I have photos of them meeting in hotels, always when your son is working, always very discreet. And there's one more thing. Marcus hesitated, as if he didn't know how to tell me. What? The pregnancy. He did some calculations based on the dates of photos and bank transfers. There's a reasonable possibility that the baby isn't your son's. I closed my eyes, breathed deeply. I felt anger, disgust, sadness for Darnell, because no matter how disappointed I was with him, he was still my son, and he was being deceived in the worst possible way. Can you prove it? Only with DNA, but I have enough evidence of the extramarital affair. Photos, messages I got from a source at the phone company, hotel entry records, enough to destroy any victim narrative she's trying to build. I took the folder, holding it tightly. How much do I owe you? Already paid by your lawyer. But, Miss Beatrice, what are you going to do with this information? Good question. What would I do? I could simply send everything to Darnell, let him discover the truth and deal with the consequences. I could make it all public, destroy Larayah the same way she was trying to destroy me. Or I could use it strategically as a trump card. I don't know yet, I admitted. But thank you. Excellent work. I left Marcus's office with the folder under my arm, feeling the weight not just of the papers, but of responsibility. Because now I knew the truth, and truth was a powerful weapon. I got home and locked myself in the office. I spread all the photos and documents on the table, studying every detail. Larayah and Rick entering a hotel, Larayah receiving the money envelope, Larayah kissing Rick in an empty parking lot. And in all the photos, she wore the same expression. It wasn't love, it was calculation. It was the face of someone playing chess when everyone around thought the game was checkers. My phone rang. Roosevelt. Beatrice, the hearing has been scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Darnell's lawyer is confident, saying he has witnesses who will prove there was a promise of donation. Let them be confident. I have something better than witnesses. What do you have? The truth. All of it. In the following days, I continued with the foundation work, but my mind was divided. Part of me wanted to simply email everything to Darnell, expose Larayah, and destroy her in the same way she was trying to destroy me. But another part knew that timing was everything. If I revealed too much too early, Larayah could invent a story, manipulate Darnell even more, play victim again. I needed to wait for the right moment. The moment when there would be no room for interpretations or excuses. A week before the hearing, I received an unexpected call. It was Peyton, or rather, it was Darnell with Peyton on the phone. Grandma? Hi, my love. Why don't you come see me anymore? Daddy said you're mad at him. Are you mad at me too? I held the phone tightly, fighting back tears. No, sweetheart. I would never be mad at you. You didn't do anything wrong. So can you come see me tomorrow? Mommy's going out and it'll be just me and Daddy. I looked at the calendar. It was Saturday tomorrow. And Larayah would be out? Yes, I can. What time? 2:00. I'll ask Daddy to make cake. After I hung up, I kept thinking. Was it a trap? An attempt by Darnell to soften me before the hearing? Or was it genuine? A father trying to reconnect his son with his grandmother. It didn't matter. I would go. Because regardless of everything, Peyton was innocent. And maybe it was my chance to talk to Darnell alone, without Larayah's poisonous influence. On Saturday, I arrived at the penthouse at exactly 2:00. Darnell opened the door, and for the first time in weeks, there was no hostility in his face, just exhaustion. Hi, Mom. Hi. Come in. I entered that space I had paid for, but had never truly been mine. It was different. Less ostentatious, more lived in. Toys scattered around, a pile of laundry to wash, signs of real life instead of the artificial perfection Larayah always insisted on maintaining. Peyton came running out of his room and threw himself into my arms. Grandma, Grandma, I made a drawing for you. I hugged my grandson, feeling that pure, unconditional love that only children can give. For a moment, I forgot all the pain, all the anger, all the problems. How beautiful, my love. I'll keep it with great care. Darnell watched us from the kitchen doorway. Want some coffee? I made cake too, as promised for Peyton. I'd like that. Thank you. We spent the afternoon like that, playing with Peyton, talking about trivialities, carefully avoiding the heavy subjects that hung between us. It was almost normal, almost like it should have always been. When Peyton went to his room to watch cartoons, Darnell and I were alone in the living room. Larayah went to her mother's house. She's spending the weekend there. Says she needs time, according to her. And are you okay? He gave a humorless laugh. No, Mom, I'm not okay. My marriage is hanging by a thread. We're about to be evicted. My wife accuses me of not defending her enough, and I don't even know what's true anymore. I looked at my son, seeing the confusion in his eyes. Would this be the moment? Should I show him what I knew? No, not yet. Not with Peyton in the next room. Not without guarantee that he would believe it. Darnell, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. What? In your marriage, in your life, are you genuinely happy? He blinked, surprised by the question. What do you mean? In your marriage, in your life, are you genuinely happy? He was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was low. I don't know. There are good moments. Peyton is wonderful. And Larayah, when she's well, can be incredible. But there's always something. Always dissatisfaction, a demand, a criticism. Nothing I do is enough. And with me? I know I was unfair. I know I let her treat you badly, but it was easier to agree than to hear her complain for days. So you chose the easy path instead of the right one? Yes. He rubbed his face with his hands. And now I'm paying the price. You evicted us. You're suing us, and honestly, I understand why.
This late recognition, as it was, touched something in me.
Darnell, you're still my son and always will be, but I can't accept being treated as something disposable anymore. I can't sacrifice my dignity for your comfort anymore. I know, and I'm truly sorry, but are you still going to testify against me? He looked down. Larayah insists. She hired the lawyer. She's controlling everything. I just want this to end. It will end faster than you imagine. I left there with my heart a little lighter, but my determination intact. Darnell was beginning to wake up, but he still wasn't ready for the complete truth. Not yet. The week of the hearing arrived. Roosevelt called me the night before. Are you prepared? Their lawyer is going to be aggressive. They'll try to paint you as spiteful, manipulative, anything to invalidate the eviction. Let them try. I have the documents, I have the contract, and I have something more. What? A bomb that's going to explode at the right moment. The morning of the hearing dawned cloudy. I dressed carefully, choosing a discreet but elegant suit. I needed to look like what I was, a serious businesswoman, not a vindictive old lady. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early. Roosevelt was there with an even thicker folder. I brought everything: contracts, transfer statements, even a copy of the message your son sent excluding you from the party. Perfect. Darnell and Larayah arrived minutes later. He was in a dark suit, looking like he hadn't slept well. She wore a light blue maternity dress, her belly prominent, her hair perfectly styled, an expression of courageous victim carefully rehearsed. Our eyes met. I didn't look away. I maintained eye contact until she was the one who looked away first. The hearing began. Darnell's lawyer, a man in his 40s with a suit too expensive for his salary, started presenting their case. Your Honor, our clients were victims of a cruel and unusual situation. Mrs. Beatrice verbally promised to donate the penthouse to the couple. My client and his wife, trusting the matriarch's word, made life plans based on that promise. And now, for personal and petty reasons, she's trying to evict them. Petty. The word echoed in the room. Roosevelt stood up. Your Honor, there's a real estate contract signed by the defendants explicitly stating that the property belongs to my client and that use is granted free of charge, subject to revocation. There's no documented promise of donation. But there are witnesses, Darnell's lawyer protested. And then the parade began. 3 of Darnell's friends testified that they heard me say the penthouse would be theirs. It didn't matter that theirs could mean temporary use, not ownership. It didn't matter that none of them were present during conversations about the legal contract. When it was my turn to testify, I stood calmly and looked directly at the judge, a man around 60 with the tired expression of someone who had seen everything. Your Honor, I worked my entire life to build wealth. I was a single mother, an entrepreneur. I overcame every imaginable difficulty. When my son asked me for help buying a penthouse, I gave it. I gave because I loved. But I was careful. I put everything in a contract. I protected my assets legally, as any sensible person would. I paused. What I didn't expect was to be systematically excluded from my family's life. I didn't expect to be forbidden from seeing my grandson. I didn't expect to receive a message at 2 a.m. saying I bothered the guests and wasn't welcome at my own grandson's party. I looked directly at Darnell and Larayah. That, Your Honor, isn't meanness, it's self-preservation. Darnell's lawyer stood up. Your Honor cannot prove these allegations of exclusion. Roosevelt smiled. Actually, we can. And then he presented everything. Darnell's messages canceling visits, Larayah's posts showing off the penthouse without ever mentioning me, records of unanswered calls, the 2 a.m. message projected on the screen for everyone to see. I saw Darnell's face turn red. I saw Larayah press her lips together, planning her next move. The judge analyzed everything in silence, then looked at Darnell and Larayah. Any objection? Their lawyer stood up. Your Honor,
It's natural for there to be family friction. Mrs. Larayah was stressed with the pregnancy, with organizing the party. Words were said in the heat of the moment. That doesn't justify an eviction. Then it was Larayah's turn to testify. She went up to the witness stand, one protective hand over her belly, eyes brimming with tears. "I always respected my mother-in-law," she began, her voice trembling and studied. "I always tried to include her in our lives, but she's very controlling. She wanted to decide everything, from Pedro's name to how to decorate the house. And when I established healthy boundaries, she got offended." Lies. Every word was a carefully constructed lie. "She promised the house would be ours. She said it several times. And now, because of a misunderstanding, she wants to take it away. I'm 7 months pregnant. Where will we live? How will I raise my children without stability?" The tears fell, perfect, convincing. The judge seemed impressed. Roosevelt looked worried. And I was calm, because I knew I still had one card to play. I raised my hand. "Your Honor, may I ask the witness a question?" The judge seemed surprised, but nodded. "You may." I stood up and looked directly at Larayah. "Mrs. Larayah, you said you always respected me, that you always tried to include me. So why have you been having an affair with Richard Taylor for the past 2 years?" The silence that fell over the room was absolute. Larayah went pale. Darnell turned his head so fast I heard his neck crack. How dare you?" "I have photos. I have records of bank transfers from him to you. I have messages. I have enough evidence to prove that you not only had an extramarital affair, but were financially supported by him throughout your marriage to my son." Roosevelt looked at me, shocked. This wasn't in the script. Darnell's lawyer stood up, stammering, That's not related to the case." "It is," I replied, "because it shows the character of the person claiming to be a victim. It shows who's really manipulative here." I looked at the judge. "May I present the evidence?" He hesitated, then nodded. Roosevelt ran to the car to get the folder I had left there, planning not to use it unless absolutely necessary. When the photos were projected on the screen, Darnell made a strangled sound. Larayah tried to stand up, but the judge ordered her to remain seated. "That's fabricated. She made all this up." "The photo metadata is verifiable. The private investigator who took them is available to testify, and if necessary, we can request the security camera recordings from the hotels." Larayah began to cry. Not the studied tears from before. This was real panic, genuine desperation. The judge banged his gavel. "I'm calling a 20-minute recess. When we return, I want to hear the parties without the lawyers." The recess was the longest of my life. I stayed in the courthouse hallway, sitting on an uncomfortable bench, while I heard muffled screams coming from the room where Darnell and Larayah were. When we returned to the courtroom, Darnell was alone at the defendant's table. Larayah was no longer there. "Where is your wife?" the judge asked.
Darnell looked down. "She left. She ran out when his voice failed. The judge sighed. "Well, let's proceed with whoever is present. Mr. Darnell, after everything that's been revealed, do you still maintain your eviction contest?" Darnell was silent for a long time, then raised his eyes and looked directly at me. "No, Your Honor. My mother has every right to reclaim her property. I was a fool in so many ways." The judge nodded. "In this case, I grant the repossession request. The defendant has 30 days to vacate the property. As for the verbal donation allegation lawsuit, I find it groundless due to lack of documentary evidence and the clear existence of a real estate contract signed by the parties." He banged the gavel.
Hearing adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Darnell was waiting for me. He was standing next to my car, shoulders slumped, looking like someone who had aged 10 years in one morning. "Mom." "Darnell, I need to know. How did you find out?" "The building janitor. She heard things, saw things. I hired an investigator." He shook his head, almost laughing. "And I thought you were the naive one, that I was the smart one. I built a company from scratch, son. You think I did that being naive?" "How long have you known?" "A few weeks, but I didn't tell you because I needed you to discover it at the right moment, in a way you couldn't deny or rationalize." He looked at the cloudy sky. "The baby, do you think?" "I don't know, but you have the right to a DNA test, and should demand one." She left the courthouse and went straight to her mother's house. She texted saying she's not coming back, that she'll sue for defamation, for everything. "Let her sue. I have proof of everything." Darnell passed his hand through his hair, that familiar gesture of frustration. How could I be so blind? How didn't I see it? Because she was good at what she did, and because you wanted to believe. We all want to believe in fairy tales. I took a step toward him. "Darnell, I'm still your mother. I'll always love you, but I can't protect you from the consequences of your choices anymore. You need to learn to stand on your own." "And Peyton, where will I live with him?" "I have a 2-bedroom apartment that's empty. It was where I kept my satellite office. You can stay there until you get organized. Symbolic rent, enough for you to maintain your dignity, but not enough to break you." His eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why are you doing this after everything?" "Because you're my son, and because I finally saw you make the right choice. Larayah lied up there, and you didn't side with her. You chose the truth." He hugged me then, tight, desperate, like he hadn't done since childhood. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. For every moment I hurt you, every time I chose her over you, every disrespect I let pass." I returned the embrace, feeling the pieces of my broken heart begin to mend. Not completely, that would take time, but it was a beginning. Thank you for listening all the way. Maybe the story has ended, but there are still so many feelings to share. Leave a few words from your heart in the comments. Maybe the next story begins with yours.